Is Joe Biden still alive? We've reached that point in the presidential election cycle where he has dropped out mysteriously, but during the dropping out process didn't appear on camera, and so raised a lot of questions as to the state of his health and his mental acumen. Now, spoiler alert, as of constructing this segment, he has been pictured in person.
We can't guarantee he'll last till the end of it.
But... No, but he is alive. But I'm just going to go over the so-called conspiracy theory that led people to ask the credible question as to whether or not we were in a Death of Stalin style situation. So the headline that came out of this was, of course, from regime mouthpiece The New York Times, the far right spreading baseless claims about Biden's whereabouts. Many conspiracy theorists and far-right commentators, hello, are spreading doubts that President Biden is alive after he posted a letter on Sunday resigning from the presidential campaign. The theory is baseless. Mr. Biden, who learned he had COVID on July 17th, has been in isolation since, called into a campaign event for Vice President Kamala Harris on Monday. We'll get to that. And the two exchange praise and playful banter. The theory adds to a torrent of falsehoods and misleading posts by right-wing influencers that have spread since Mr. Biden's announcement. They have falsely denigrated Democrats for conducting a coup against primary voters by removing Mr. Biden and have attacked Ms. Harris with a deluge of sexist and racist remarks. How is it not a coup?
I don't know.
For days, George Clooney, senior Democrats, sitting congressmen and donors were saying, Joe, drop out, we're pulling all the funds. We don't trust you. Joe didn't want to drop out. Joe's family certainly didn't want to drop out because I got comfy at the White House. And so they exerted pressure until he dropped out.
But the allegation that he posted something to his social media is obviously false as well. Joe Biden obviously did not, A, write that letter, and B, post it himself. Why wasn't it a headed paper?
It was Corinne Jean-Pierre who runs his Twitter account.
It absolutely is.
So Diversity Hire deposed her own boss, and he hasn't yet given any on-camera statements about how he feels about it.
She's not going to be behind it. It'll be Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, and a few other of the sort of powerful Democrats who have just got around and said, look, we're just getting you out, Joe. But the thing is, this opens a whole raft of uncomfortable questions. Okay, so Joe Biden is not mentally fit to run for a second shot at the presidency, but for the next 5 months, he is still the commander-in-chief.
He can still declare war on Iran.
Exactly.
Well,
if someone declares war on America,
actually,
they've got to be.
He seems to have given up the duties for doing that.
Well, that's the point. Then who's in charge?
We have some names. We don't have all the names, I think. So
exactly,
pretty concerning as the ambassadors of democracy to depose the most popular elected president of all time. Might cast that into doubt. But hey ho, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Anyway, so let's set up the timeline for what actually happened here that led people to question it. So here's the information we got from conspiracy outlet, the Wall Street Journal. This is Biden testing positive for COVID and appearing at a Las Vegas campaign event. I'm just going to let that play in the background on mute because he was seen, this is the last time he was seen on camera right before he got into the car and then failed to show up at the campaign event in Las Vegas where one of his ambassadors stood up and said, Joe Biden has tested positive for COVID and so can't be with us today.
There's more life in the mummies at the British Museum. I'm not even joking. How do you feel? Like he looks like he's about to collapse.
Well, the rumor is that he slipped and hit his head.
Really? I didn't even hear that.
Yeah, the rumor is that he slipped and hit his head and had a stroke.
Well, so we have more details from this, and so we also turned to conspiracy outlet the BBC, which is actually true, considering they just spread made-up nonsense about you. This is from a White House correspondent that was following Biden around on the campaign trail. And again, if it wasn't a coup, regime-friendly outfit, the BBC, writing in this style, should raise some eyebrows. So they say, on Tuesday, I watched him energize a packed convention hall with a speech to the African-American civil rights group, the NAACP. I'm sure he gave similar energetic addresses to Robert Byrd's funeral as well. But the next morning, things began to spin out of control. The end of the road was the original Lindo Michoacan restaurant. That's Hispanic, I can't pronounce it, I'm afraid, in Las Vegas, Nevada. This was one of those highly orchestrated campaign stops where the president mingles with voters. The press was ushered inside to capture the president's entrance, so all of this is being stage managed. Bear that in mind for how this has been reported. As the door swung open, I was struck by how pale he looked and how much slower he seemed than the day before as he shook hands with diners. We shouted questions about the growing list of Democrats questioning his fitness to run. He didn't answer. Then we were hustled back to the press vans while he did a radio interview inside. We waited, and it was by now obvious that something was wrong. Suddenly, an email dropped from a BBC colleague to say the host of his next speech venue had announced on stage Mr. Biden had tested positive for COVID. As I tried to approach the White House staffer to find out what was going on, I was abruptly ordered to get back in my van, told we were leaving. The motorcade began rolling, and we were speeding our way through the suburbs of Las Vegas, destination unknown. The campaign was changing course. Suddenly, amid flashing lights and police outriders, the airport came into view. The president was going home to Delaware to recover from COVID. The campaign trip was over. On the tarmac, we had asked him one last time about waning Democrat support. This time he answered back, "I'm doing well." It wasn't quite what we had asked, not really. Perhaps he misheard us, or perhaps he meant he believed he could survive it. It turns out he couldn't. And that's brutal. But that was the last time anyone had seen Joe Biden, boarding a plane due for Delaware on the 17th of July. So, where's Joe? Well, the next time people heard from him was on the 21st when he dropped out via this letter.
Heard from him.
And this letter, other people have done a signature comparison. It looks slightly different in that it usually doesn't underline his signature.
There are also other things in it. Like, for example, at the end of Biden. Like, we covered this on Monday, and Bo pointed out that he's looking like Guy Fawkes after he was tortured.
Yeah.
That kind of signature. It's not his signature. The thing is just written differently.
The R is different as well.
The R indeed is different.
There's also no presidential seal. This is entirely personal, and it's a screenshot of a pre-typed page.
Yeah.
And it's not like the last time that a sitting president dropped out of running for a second term, which was Lyndon B. Johnson. He gave an impromptu 25-minute press conference detailing all the reasons why.
The least you'd expect, really.
Well, this is world historical. I mean, he is the figurehead of the global American empire, whether or not he still knows that. And so you would expect him to set the tone as to who his successor is going to be, the reasons why he can't continue, and address all his donors and supporters. He did not give a single video appearance until being spotted boarding a plane last night.
Yes. In an incredibly feeble state.
And Jill Biden, I think, responded to the letter with a heart emoji, I think.
Oh, did she?
Yeah, she did on Twitter, yeah.
But he says, "I'll speak to the nation later this week in more detail about my decision." That's apparently going to be tonight, isn't it? So I look forward to that.
Yeah, I wonder if he just goes rogue and said that they've, he turns around to show the blade in his back, plunged by Brutus, So just mysterious, got people asking questions. Why haven't we heard from the president if he's completely healthy, as his physician says? This is from the White House doctor, Kevin O'Connor. Nice shout out to Pfizer there, the manufacturer of Paxlovid. So good that they're still getting government.
He's taken 11 doses of Paxlovid, apparently.
Is it like Mr. Burns, where if he tries to counteract one illness, the rest of the architecture of his body just dilapidates? So he's got to be careful about how much he recalibrates. This was July the 22nd, right? This is after 5 days after he disappeared on that plane, and no one had heard from him. So he's healthy. Is he as well as he claims? Because then we got reports from, and this is tips given to MAGA aligned journalists, but so worth taking with a pinch of salt, but worth listening to. This is according to Charlie Kirk, where he says, "I got a weird lead on a story that people should look into, and he got a call from a source close to Las Vegas Metro. The official story was that Biden's trip was cut short last week due to COVID. However, according to this source, the US Secret Service informed Las Vegas Metro there was an emergency situation involving Joe Biden, and to close necessary streets so that the President of the United States could be transported immediately to University Medical, which they began to do in earnest. Mysteriously, there was a stand-down order, and the Secret Service informed LVPD that they were going to medevac POTUS to Johns Hopkins University Medical Center, which they presumed meant fly him back east ASAP. Apparently, the rumor mill in the police department was that Joe Biden was dying or possibly dead."
Right, so this is the fell over and had a stroke theory.
Yes. Now, Laura Loomer had reported much the same on July 6th, that there'd been an earlier medical issue on Air Force One. I will stress, this is Laura Loomer, so do take it with a pillar of salt. She's not been right on everything, let's put it that way, but we're seeing lots of stories.
Nice biblical reference.
There you go. Lots and lots of stories here that attest to the fact that Joe Biden's health is, well, as bad as everyone with a set of eyeballs on a video phone seems to suggest. So it's not implausible. Then a piece of evidence got added by a senior White House correspondent at the Daily Mail. So Charlie Kirk here is quote retweeting his own post, which responds to a tip-off email from someone claiming to have retired from the Las Vegas Metro and have sources there. And he's got texts from the fact that Las Vegas Metro police officers were making plans to take into UMC trauma, that they were meant to shut down the route, and the route got redirected. So Joe Biden was destined for one hospital very quickly. He then says that Emily Goodin, senior White House correspondent for the Daily Mail from July 17th, documented the flight time from Las Vegas to Dover, Delaware, near where Biden lives, was 3 hours, 48 minutes. So that's extremely fast. And it flew so fast that the plane seems to have shook. So they took off urgently, with haste. Why were they so panicked? Interesting question. So let's look at the route from Dover. Where is that? Well, if we zoom out a little bit, that's where it's right near Johns Hopkins Medical Center in Baltimore. So it's plausible they could have landed in Dover, Delaware, near Biden's house, and then, obviously, to throw people off the scent, if they were really sending him to a hospital because something more severe than just going home to rest from COVID was going on, they could have driven to Johns Hopkins within less than 2 hours.
Or flown in by helicopter.
Yes, possibly, quite. I don't know if anyone spotted that taking off, but it would be interesting to ask. So here's another thing as well. So the dossier from Jordan Shatnell decided to talk to some of those officers and people. I believe he got some Secret Service sources as well that were there on July the 17th, and he has confirmed that officers working within the president's detail described Wednesday as chaotic from the very start. Biden was way behind his schedule before the incidents. Several sources said things went really haywire at the restaurants. That might have been where he slipped over and hit his head. Suddenly, when he was supposed to be scheduled to deliver the Unidos US speech, all hell broke loose. Several law enforcement officers on duty say they were informed over the radio that the president was dealing with an unspecified medical emergency. So not COVID, which they would have known. This was sent out on encrypted police airwaves as if something akin to a 5-alarm fire had broken out. So, serious emergency. Our sources estimate it was easily hundreds of Las Vegas metropolitan officers and employees who heard the broadcast live. So, a curious media shouldn't have a problem reporting any follow-ups to this story. Which makes you question, why haven't they? If the BBC was saying that the campaign stop was very crowd-managed, if they had New York Times reporting earlier in the attempt to pressure Biden out that a lot of his interviews were pre-scripted and all the radio stations had been delivered the same question. For example, that one black radio host on a local radio station that had been sacked for taking questions from the campaign. Is there a top-down mandated conspiracy of silence of reporting the actual nature of this medical emergency? Doesn't sound good, but there you go. According to law enforcement sources, the president's motorcade was initially planning on heading to University Medical Center. When researching for this story, we found the local NBC affiliate, KSNV, had confirmed last week that UMC was on standby after being alerted about a possible medical issue with President Biden Wednesday afternoon when visiting Southern Nevada. But the president's team decided not to bring him to the hospital. The plans changed in rapid succession once more. It was then relayed over to on-duty officers on the president's detail. They would need to clear an express route to Harry Reid International Airport, which is where they flew from the airport space to the Dover, Delaware place.
Yeah.
Several of the officers we spoke to said this was indeed being reported and acting on as a full-blown medical emergency. So all of this might get you concerned for Biden's health, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's dead and gone, right?
Sure.
Well, then people start to get really concerned when...
Yeah, I was going to bring this up, actually, just in case you didn't have it.
Yeah, I'll just play the clip.
Yeah, go on.
Kamala Harris did a campaign event in Delaware, so just down the road from Joe, and Joe apparently made an appearance over a call, not video call.
Phoned in, allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly, according to a slip of the tongue from Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
It is so good to hear our president's voice. Joe, I know you're still on the call, and we've been talking every day. You guys heard it from Doug's voice. We love Joe and Jill. We really do. They truly are like family to us. And we do, everybody here does.
It's mutual.
I knew you were still there. You're not going anywhere, Joe.
I'm watching you, kid. I'm watching you, kid. I love you.
I love you, Joe.
Did she nearly say recording?
She very nearly said recording. That's correct.
Also, look, if he's got COVID, every time we've seen him at the debates or giving a speech, he always coughs into his hand. If his mic's live and he's got COVID, why was he not coughing throughout the duration of this entire campaign event?
But also, it's entirely possible to train an AI to simply change someone's voice to sound like someone else now.
Or to use 11 Labs from the abundant amount of video footage we've got of Biden to say exactly what.
Mystery Grove, when he speaks on his podcast, he uses a Joe Biden voice. And it's totally...
It's incredible.
Yeah, there's no distinguishing it from the real thing. I mean, the COVID diagnosis thing is interesting as well, because if you think, so he's diagnosed with COVID at what, in the late afternoon, that sort of time. So has he been showing no symptoms through the day? Has he not been coughing?
Were the other people in the restaurant that he met with at the campaign event told to isolate as well?
Yeah, it seems so sudden. It's, I mean, it's more likely surely that Joe Biden would have woken up with a cough and they would have said, look, you've obviously got some kind of respiratory problem going on. It may be COVID. You're going to need to take a test. Are we really supposed to believe that it just suddenly came on when he was out in this restaurant?
It's the regime-approved reason.
Of course.
There's a distinct, I say, sort of lack of curiosity or response around it. Okay, so are other people isolating now? Do the families, like you say, need to know? No. He's just got COVID, and that's the story. So don't worry about it. It's like, okay, it's not in isolation.
How many weeks ago was the debate? 2?
But what, between Trump and Biden?
Yes.
Was it only 2?
It was 3, I think.
Yeah,
3
it feels
weeks
like
ago.
a lifetime ago.
What was the excuse there why he wasn't all put together mentally?
They didn't really have one.
No, they said he had a cold.
Oh.
Yes, they did.
Well,
So did they not test him then? Why are they testing him 3
Is it
weeks
long
on?
COVID?
Is it COVID so long that everyone he's come into contact with in the last 3 weeks now has to isolate?
Definitely feels like an excuse.
So you can see now that lots of people might have some questions as to whether or not Joe Biden's still around. Think they're probably valid. And this is why people like Representative Lauren Boebert said, a letter from a doctor is not proof of life. For the 3rd time today, I'm asking Joe Biden to provide the American people with proof of life.
It's true.
From a sitting congressperson,
Yeah.
we're kind of in a weird space if we're even asking that question.
We need to talk about his brother as well.
Yes,
I
please
think.
do.
So Frank Biden spoke to, I reported on this for InfoWars. So I work at the weekend as a reporter for InfoWars. And Frank Biden spoke to CBS. He gave them a prepared series of answers to some questions, which they read out. And he said, I'm going to enjoy what little time I have left with my brother, which isn't something you say about somebody who is in the best of health.
Well, perhaps he has information that would lead to the arrest of Hillary Clinton, and he knows he has much time left.
But the funny thing is then, of course, the rest of the Biden family came out and said, look, Frank is a drunk. Don't believe anything. Don't believe anything Frank says. He's been on the source again. Yeah, I mean...
So we can believe Hunter Biden, literal crackhead, but not a man who happens to like a few gin and tonics in the afternoon about whether or not his brother's going to die. Okay, all right. No, I think I'm not a conspiracy theorist. This all seems fine to me. Another thing not to be a conspiracy theorist about is that as Biden had disappeared from public view, he signed over certain executive functions to members of his cabinet.
So that contradicts what the doctor said, that he was performing his presidential duties as usual. No, apparently he's not.
Yes. So this is to do with the Rebuilding of Economic Prosperity and Opportunity for Ukrainians Act. So to do with Ukraine funding.
Right, of course.
So I assume...
Well, that has to carry on as usual.
Yeah.
Well, of course. There was the joke that as soon as Biden had got COVID and then dropped out the race, that Zelensky had like 57 missed phone calls and was going, are we still good for my payments? Are we fine?
Well, it's the Great American Slush Fund, isn't it now? Yeah. So Afghanistan is done. Now we've got Ukraine. The slush fund money has to continue.
Yeah, so this is putting Antony Blinken and Janet Yellen, Secretary of State and Treasury Secretary, in charge of what money is being allocated to Ukraine. I assume this is just the allocation of the funds that have already been voted on by Congress and not an executive order that they can bypass Congress if they want to give them more money. Please correct me on that in the comments. But if there's a war that America is currently involved in, and I mean, not that Congress has declared any of the wars that America has been involved in the last how many years, but at least the commander of the military is meant to be directing their strategic involvement in this. If he's now no longer handling that, why? If he's in perfect health? I mean, people were just going, are they prepping to offhand power to other people because Joe Biden just isn't around to take power anymore? I mean, there's no way that they would puppeteer his corpse around and pretend he isn't dead, right?
He's isolating with COVID, and for some reason the internet isn't working in the isolation bunker.
Yeah, he hasn't taken the post-it note off of his camera.
But we have to ask as well, how long can you isolate from COVID realistically? I mean, it gives
As the president,
it gives him a window of maybe. I mean, when I had COVID and I had it quite bad, it took me 2 weeks to get over it. So let's say he's got 2 weeks because he's a very old man. What then? I mean, they have to wheel him out.
But he's had multiple boosters, so he shouldn't need to isolate for that long, should he? It's very odd.
No.
Very strange.
But they're limited in how long they can milk this.
Well, you say that, but then people were thinking, would they really do this to Joe? He's been a party loyalist for ages. He's the president, for God's sake. And then they remember Dianne Feinstein, who was basically dead. So for those who don't remember, Senator Dianne Feinstein, I think she was the oldest sitting senator from California. She got shingles, reportedly. It looks like she's had a stroke as a result of that, considering she couldn't use one side of her face. She took a leave of absence from March to May 2023, but didn't resign her Senate seat. She told reporters that she had been here and been voting when she came back, so she obviously didn't remember that she took time off.
Yeah.
She was still wheeled in for a vote on the Defense Appropriations Act, Ukraine funding. Funny that, because they needed to get it over the line because congressional Republicans had already tried to block it, so they were afraid that Senate Republicans were also going to try and prevent it after Mike Johnson had become the Speaker of the House. She then granted power of attorney to her daughter in July 2023. So less than 2 months later, she needed power of attorney. She was hospitalized after falling at her home in San Francisco in August, and she died on September 29th. Feinstein's office had signed her resignation letter before she'd given power of attorney, and she was interviewed about it, and she didn't know they'd put it out. They resigned on her behalf. So just saying, that Joe Biden resignation letter is starting to look a little bit weird when he still hasn't commented on it. Or, for example, remember Ruth Bader Ginsburg?
Yeah.
I was going to bring her up.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg falling asleep at the State of the Union address. They knew she had cancer as of February 2020, and they didn't tell the public. And they reported her dying wish as not wanting to have her replacement appointed until a new president had been installed. They are not above using their long-standing colleagues as corpses to fill seats until a suitable replacement can be allocated. And people have seen this for years, and hence the conspiracy theories that Biden's corporeal form may now be the only thing being used. But fear not, Joe Biden is alive. He's looking miserable and grumpy. We're not going to go into the, again, conspiracy theories that this could be a Uday Hussein-style body double situation. It's absolutely not the case. Joe Biden is here in Dover, Delaware, incapable of properly answering reporters' questions and looking very confused and angry. I suppose we'll learn just how happy he is about being deposed at tonight's presidential address. But the fact that we were even asking whether or not he was dead shows you the American Republic isn't in a very healthy state.
And here's another thing. Do we actually know whether the presidential address is going to be pre-recorded or will it be live? Because it may very well be a pre-recorded video, in which case, when was it filmed?
Quite. Well, worrying stuff.
Hi folks, thanks for watching, and if you'd like to support us, you can do so for £5 a month over on lotuseast.com, because of course we're demonetized here. And while you're doing so, you can watch some of our amazing premium shows, such as Calvin Robinson's Common Sense Crusade, in which he uses the word Mohammedan more than anyone else that I know. And go and follow us over on Twitter/X at lotuseaters_com.